Story family salute, y'all. It's your boy Tim Snow coming out of Lamarck, Texas, man. We got another one for y'all here. Straight up, this is called Bluebird by Jason Gallegos. You know what I like to do? I like to take y'all down through it with us, let y'all feel the emotions and what it feels like. That way you don't want this shit for yourself. You start seeing what it's like, man. Pay attention. The time was drawing near for my departure. I had 13 months built up in the county jail. I was convicted and sentenced to prison, and I was ready to leave to start serving out my long-term sentence in TDC. Before my departure, I had the privilege to be laced up by the old school veterans that had already been in and out of the system most of their adult lives. These convicts prided themselves as they explained in detail what I should expect once I stepped onto the Bluebird that would take me to my final destination, which was prison. I couldn't help but notice how excited and enthusiastic these convicts were as they shared with me their personal experience about riding on the Bluebird. It was definitely therapeutic. Their stories eased my fear, and they become joyful as they shared their stories. The stories enabled me to prepare for what lay ahead. Doing 13 months in county jail meant confinement inside of a building with no direct sunlight and very limited movement. I was getting restless because towards the end of my stay in the county, I was deemed too dangerous to be kept out in population. So at one point, I was kept in isolation for 23 hours a day behind a double steel door in the county jail. I was only given an hour to be outside of my cell and was given 3 options to utilize this hour. Either take a shower, recreate, or use the phone. Being in solitary confinement gave me a strong desire to be sent off to prison. At that point, I didn't care if prison was a dangerous place. All I knew by the many stories I heard in prison, I would be able to roam freely, although it would be behind fortified double-link fence with barbed wire rolled up like a slinky on top that stretched all the way around. I was ready to go. Towards the end of my stay in the county jail, I was let out of solitary confinement for good behavior. I was allowed to spend 12 hours outside of my cell to watch TV in the day room or spend my time telling war stories among the other convicts. It was March 28, 1998. I was 19 years old and 2 days shy of my 20th birthday. The day of my departure had arrived. The Bluebird was finally here to take me to my new place. I was called out of my cell at about 4 in the morning. I had a gut-wrenching knot in my stomach, not because I feared going to prison, but because I was leaving behind my mom, 2 sisters, and my brother for the first time in life. I wasn't able to say goodbye. The emotional pain was intense. Inside of me was a young boy crying out in agony for the care and comfort of his mother, but couldn't touch her. I wanted to be rescued out of this nightmare. My nightmare was becoming a reality. I was feeling the powerful grip the state of Texas had on me, and nobody, not even God, could really remove this grip. I was placed in a holding cell with about 30 inmates that were also catching chain at night. Together, we were all going to take the bus ride on the Bluebird. I wasn't very talkative like the others, but I was listening intently at the conversations they were having, paying attention to all the faces, and most of them fit the prison mold. They carried on in conversation if they were all headed out on a field trip. Then an inmate asked me, "What are you in for and how much time did the courts give you?" I responded to his question by saying I was convicted of murder and given 50 years. And everybody in the holding cell got quiet. It wasn't the word murder that shocked them. It was the 50 years that made them cringe. I realized I was the only one in the group who had a long prison sentence to stay. There was light at the end of the tunnel for all of them but me. Prison would become my home. I kept looking out the holding cell because I knew the prison guards would arrive at any moment to collect their bounty, which happened to be me. At a distance, I heard the sound of chains being dragged on the concrete floor, and the knot in my stomach grew even tighter. The appearance of 3 white men with cowboy hats, dark red faces, wearing gray uniforms, and cowboy boots stood on the other side of the cell door looking through a plexiglass window. I kept reciting this mantra in my head. "Jason, pretend that you've been through this a million times. You're a veteran. Better yet, you're a pro. You were born for this. These men are scared. You're not." The more I recited this mantra, the more sane I became. Courage began to replace the fear that tried to penetrate my heart. The prison guard began to call out our names in alphabetical order and pairing us up in twos. Once all the names were called out, we were led into a dressing room to remove our Orange County jumpers, including on what I had on underneath. We all stood naked, ready to be searched by the prison guards. I was next. The guard stood in front of me and shouted, "Don't reckless eyeball me, boy. Run your fingers through your hair, flap those ears, open your mouth, stick your tongue out, lift your arms up, and hold your nutsack up." And that's all he said. Now squat and cough. Going through this drill made me feel violated, but I knew I had to get used to it. This because it was going to be the new norm for me from here on out. While I put on my white jumper suit, I felt very cold. I was nervous and my body shook uncontrollably. We stood in pairs once again, but this time in white uniforms. We looked like a flock of sheep being led to the slaughterhouse. One more item needed to be added to my prison costume, and that was the shackles. My feet were shackled so closely together I was only able to take small steps forward. Then a small metal box was used to bind my wrists together. Another small chain hung heavily that kept my hands and feet chained together, causing me to stoop over. I couldn't even stand up. The metal door swung open, and there it was, the Bluebird. My eyes were now able to see the Bluebird in all its glory. I've seen a prototype like this bus many times in the Hollywood movies, and I heard many first-hand accounts of it, but this was going to be my first ride. It was time to experience this event for myself. Behind the Bluebird, a prison guard held a shotgun in his hand with the butt of the gun resting on his hip. In a hunchback posture, we marched in pairs towards the bus. The echo of clanging chains reverberated loudly, rattling in the drum of my ear. It was a pathetic sight. I stood in the front entrance of the bus. I had to crawl up the steps of the bus because my hands and feet were chained too close together. I had been determined to sit by a window. I sat down towards the center on the left side of the bus. My window was covered with 16-gauge metal sheet that had dime-sized holes into it that I couldn't even see out of. The garage door began to lift upward. and the morning light poured in like a rushing flood. The Bluebird began to move forward. The guard with a shotgun entered the cage through the doors in the back of the bus. In front of the bus stood another guard holding a shotgun. I still couldn't believe my life would end this way. A year and a half ago on Thanksgiving Day, I proposed to my girlfriend, Teresa. I sent a notification to the recruiting center stating my interest to join the U.S. Marine Corps. Life for me was just getting started. Or was I just feeling sorry for myself right now? In between thoughts, I stared at all the happy people walking on the sidewalk, riding in their cars, and others going out in their daily lives of freedom I'd taken for granted and then lost. As I watched, the free people squinted their eyes at the prison bus as we drove by, and I could almost hear their judgmental thoughts. As we rode through the city, everything seemed to be moving fast. Everybody seemed to be in a rush. But as I sat by the window, I simply enjoyed the view. Every building, person, car, tree that we passed gave me delight. The Bluebird finally made its way on the Highway 37 South. I kept my eye on every green sign that we passed. The most memorable sign that I read that day said, "Now leaving San Antonio city limits." I wanted to cry. I felt like I was being kidnapped. Deep inside, I was crying. This was not how I imagined myself in the adult world. Boy, did I have the most painful emotional blues during my ride to prison. I realized why this bus was famously dubbed by the convicts the old Bluebird.